Here's a little story about how Google Maps can steer you dangerously wrong. We left the town of Niebla, Chile early in the morning with the intention of visiting the Alerce Milenario tree in Alerce Costero National Park. The Alerce Milenario tree is considered to be one of the oldest trees on the planet, if not the oldest. After crossing the mouth of the Valdivia River by ferry, we arrived in the town of Corral. From Corral, Google Maps offered us two routes to reach the tree: a longer route to the west on the highway via the town of La Union, or a shorter route along the coast and through the rainforest of the Reserva Costera Valdiviana. Of course, we chose what sounded like the scenic route along the coast and through the rainforest. Google Maps indicated the entire route was 60 miles long and would take an hour and 47 minutes. How wrong Google was. Over the first 14 miles out of the town of Corral, we drove on a good paved road along the foggy coast. When we arrived at the junction with the dirt road through the reserve, an encouraging mileage sign showed us the distance to the town of La Union, well beyond our destination. However, just beyond that sign was another sign which read, "Road enabled next 10 kilometers." We weren't quite sure what this meant, but we carried on. How wrong we were. In reality, the next 23 miles of dirt road degraded steadily, until it wasn't really a road at all. But by the time we realized that this route was a dangerous mistake, we'd crossed a number of treacherous sections of boulders, holes, narrow stretches, and slick mud, so we thought it would be better to press on. How wrong we were. This so-called road continued to get even worse. By the point we realized that no matter which direction we went, continuing forward or going back, we may wind up in a bad situation we could regret. At this point, Google Maps indicated that we were fewer than 30 miles from the national park, and we knew that the final 17 miles just beyond the Hueicolla estuary was maintained and certainly passable because there was a village and services there. The prospect of the unknown relatively few miles ahead of us seemed less daunting than what we had already managed to cross. Additionally, backtracking not only meant having to repeat the bad sections we'd already driven through, but it would then require driving 100 miles the long way around on the other Google Maps route to the park. And the final straw was, the road was so narrow there really wasn't anywhere we could easily turn our truck around. So, we went on. We had to cross several small bridges that barely held us, and at one point a tire broke through a weak spot in a bridge and almost dropped the truck in the rushing stream below. Only our momentum pushed us across and kept us from possible disaster. In other places we had to stop to fill holes in the track with rocks so we could pass. All the while our 4x4 was working hard and we heard the horrible sound of boulders and rocks scraping and banging various parts of the undercarriage. As we slowly moved forward through the rainforest, we didn't see a single other person the entire day. And then we encountered the final barrier. After 5 hours of slow, tense, and treacherous driving along this mere 23 miles of dirt road, we reached the Hueicolla estuary. Frazzled and tired, we realized there was no bridge, and the 100-yard-long crossing required driving through water that was over 3 feet deep in places. This was a hurdle we could not navigate. We'd reached the end of the road. Staring in exhausted disbelief, we realized that, although we were just 17 relatively easy miles from the park, since just on the other side of the river was a proper forest road, we could not go forward and would have to turn around and return the same way we'd come, driving back over all of the same sketchy patches and obstacles. You'll see this dead-end river crossing at the 11-minute mark of the video. Google Maps indicated that the dirt road section we had covered up to the river would take 45 minutes to complete. Instead, it took us more than 5 hours to crawl over less than 20 miles of washed out and nearly non-existent road. After turning around, we managed to maneuver about halfway back over the dirt road before the dwindling daylight forced us to stop and set up camp for the night. At this point, we'd been driving for more than 10 hours, though we'd only traveled 65 miles in total, including some of the worst road we've ever driven on. Exhausted, we climbed into our sleeping bags. It wasn't a restful sleep. We knew there was one short but steep section ahead, and as our memory served us, we were unsure if we could pass driving in this direction due to the approach angle. Nightmares of our truck becoming stuck and being a permanent feature of the rainforest kept us awake. The next morning we packed up camp and continued our return along this so-called road. Across the bad bridges, deep muddy sections, and the giant holes. When we arrived at the obstacle that had kept us up worrying, we realized it wasn't as bad as our memory led us to believe. We crossed that and all the other scary bits, and we eventually made it back out to the paved road where our saga had begun the previous day, feeling extremely relieved to have made it out. And then, at that point, we drove the long way around to the national park, taking us more than 24 hours instead of the 2.5 hours it would have taken us had we followed this routing to begin with, and not the scenic route Google Maps had offered us. I have gone into Google Maps and marked this section as not passable. We'll see if Google Maps does anything about it, but you've been warned. Now sit back and enjoy the rest of the footage. It's much easier watching it than experiencing it.